Okay, so recently I've been looking at some of my games and try to figure out what makes me win games and what makes me lose games. And personally, I feel like the main cause of me performing terribly in a game is a lot of deaths. And the main cause of feeling good in a game and feeling like I had a high impact is having a low amount of deaths. That might sound pretty obvious, but one thing that have helped me in the past is looking at those deaths and seeing what caused them, to try to minimize them in future games and actually do concrete things that you need to work on that are better than just dying less and having more kills. I'm talking about having actual concrete plans for what to focus on in your games. I think another benefit of focusing on the deaths is that you can locate them pretty easily, and it's fairly simple to find the cause of each and every death. You can usually get some pretty concrete and easy things to work on after just a 30-minute session of looking at a terrible game you had. Okay, so I'm gonna expose myself a bit personally here and show you a really bad game I had recently as POS 4. And I thought we could talk about some of the interesting causes of having such a terrible game. Because I don't simply want to say that I had bad positioning. I recommend looking back at least 10 seconds, 20 seconds and really figuring out what made you make the decision that led you to dying. Not just what led to you dying. Look a bit deeper. Okay, so what I usually personally do is simply go into the game, select my hero camera like this, and then just simply skip until I see this death counter change. So let's do that. Okay, so here is my first death. Let's skip back to when it happened. Okay, so let's just take a look at what caused the death. So right here I'm pretty low health. You can talk about the levels and look at the items if you want, but I'm gonna get a more surface image of my mistakes, and hopefully it can inspire you and give you some insight on your gameplay as well, and help you find the causes of your own mistakes. So I think right here, let's just finish the clip first. But I think the pretty obvious mistake that happened right here for me is that I simply went up here when I should have been playing down here. If I play down here I have things to blink into, or so I can't really get as many hits as he did. He got 5 hits right there, and I should be able to survive this situation. And I feel like at this spot you can argue that, oh wait, it was worth it for this kill. But in my experience, thinking in that type of pattern is extremely destructive. If you think about a Smurf playing at your level, they're most likely gonna have a super low death count. And you kinda have to think in that way, in my opinion, to improve. And think that you are worth more than the enemy. Your time is more effective than the enemy's. And if you think in that type of pattern, and then you will realize that you will pretty much never want to trade your life for the enemy's. Of course, there are some exceptions with the enemy hard carry and mid, but also remember that very few kills actually require you to die. Like in this scenario, for example, I definitely didn't need to go up towards the enemy tower and get myself killed. If I had simply walked back here, or tricks of traded downwards instead of whatever I do right here, then I would have probably survived this, and I have basically no damage on the disruptor anyways. So my impact was minimal right here, and I just fed the enemy. Let's look at the next death I have. I'm gonna let the clip play out right here. Okay, so I think this is one of the kind of exceptions to my little rule here. Because, as you can see, I saw my hard support tip it in, and I'm here, and I simply go for the 50-50. I generally don't advise 50-50s, but at this point, since I'm low level and he's high level and this lane is pretty much ruined at this point, then I think it wasn't a terrible idea, and I think I would have done it again if I had a chance. Of course, the disruptor was already here in the trees, like you should expect, and some unlucky hits here led to us not getting the kill. And I genuinely don't feel that bad about this death. Out of all the different deaths you can have, a 50-50 is not really something to worry too much about. You might have argued that, oh, it's better to be consistent and not go for these types of risky trades. And while I do agree, I think in just this specific scenario, it was a good idea to go for this trade. Even though it failed. Okay, here comes death number 3. And I'm alone in lane here, which I think is the main thing to keep in mind. And once again Disruptor was ready and I simply get the kill here. I think my main mistake here was simply not taking into account that I had no creeps coming up and I have no other player in my lane. I feel like even if I played this lane a lot more carefully, they still could have killed me easily. With the glimpse and the fury swipes, I'm dead to pretty much anything these guys throw at me. So I simply should have stayed far back and realized that I'm not that strong as a level 4 Riki alone in lane with no creeps to fall back onto. Okay, now this is in my opinion one of the more interesting deaths, because this is a Riki specific tech. So let's just let the clip play out as usual. So the enemy hit a very nice combo here, I'll have to admit. They were ready with the static field and SF stood on top of me and just hit the full Requiem of Souls. But I think the one thing that could have saved me in this scenario, first of all, I'm low health and you can talk about my wand and a lot of things. But when I go for this E, which in retrospect was very stupid, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, that I should have cancelled it earlier. If I had cancelled it here, I would maybe have had the opportunity to walk back and blink back, and I should have realized at this point that it's not worth fighting this fight. If you look at the levels carefully, you'll notice that I'm up against a level 9 SF. That's not a fun target to play around. And since it's a 3 versus 3, I think there is genuinely no way we can win this fight when they have ultimates and we don't. So at this point I should have just realized that and went back immediately. But instead they get this combo right here. And I have to say that is literally perfect timing. Okay, I think this death is a bit embarrassing to show you. And you might be asking why, and that is because this is a death cause that I've worked a lot on before to remove. If we go back a bit and look at what happened here. Okay, so right here we are chasing the enemy supports, and one thing I do here is that I assume the silencer kill is already finished up, that it's secured, and I go to slow the disruptor. And of course that goes to the tier 2 tower. And I worked so goddamn much to not dive the towers, because when I did the same thing a year ago and looked at my death causes, I found that diving towers was one of the most prominent ones. I've worked pretty hard to stop doing that and I've gotten a lot of MMR because of it. But yeah, you can just see old habits shining through. This was objectively just a terrible dive. It might not look like I took a lot of damage, but it led to me getting hit by this, getting a couple of tower hits, which kinda chopped away more than half my health, and that led to Brood getting this very easy pick-off. Death number 6. This is actually my most embarrassing death out of all deaths I've had the past week. So right here, they are pushing the tower. I know there are 3 heroes here. I think there is a silencer in the trees right here that isn't visible right now, but I know there are 3 heroes right there, and they are super strong. So I decide, foolishly, to go for this last hit right here. This is completely idiotic. Like genuinely, I think a lot of heralds and guardians would never make this play. It's just something that automatically happens when I'm losing a game and I lose focus, then I just do stupid shit like this. You might argue, but oh, if I had hit E and then told my team to teleport here, I could have blinked out, but no. Simply going for last hit is just completely idiotic right here. I feel like I need to value last hits a lot more, but I also need to respect the enemy's levels a lot more right here as well. If both of these heroes were level 6, then sure, I could probably do this and get away with it. But I need to accept that I'm in a losing state and play accordingly. Because at this point, yeah, it's just a completely free kill for them. Okay, I'm gonna talk about my final death and my final case study. So let's just look at the clip. They use dust and I'm just completely dead here. So when I looked at the replays, I looked at their vision and I saw that they have 0 vision right here. I have no idea how they saw me. How did they know to use dust? Well, my courier just drove up and revealed my location. So that's what happened. That's not the main cause of my death. That I shouldn't blame the courier for dying here. What I should be talking about instead is how terrible my positioning is. If you look at the minimap, I'm in the front. And that's usually not a huge problem as Riki, But at this point we know they have control of the entire triangle area, the entire radiant triangle, and I still go up to get some vision, which I don't think is a bad idea in itself, but I go just way out of position. I'm way over here, which is completely unneeded. It's daytime and I have complete vision of the high ground even when standing in a safe position over here. Okay, so this is one of the few scenarios where I'll actually accept saying that you have bad positioning as an answer, because that is simply what happened here. Otherwise, I think all of the other deaths kinda are able to get characterized into some other deeper rooted problem. For example, the things I've written down to work on myself right here in the following games is to not get between the enemy and the tower, which was my first death. Be very mindful when I'm alone in lane to make sure I actually have escape options. I need to respect levels and run out of fights when they look terrible. I need to accept that some fights are just gonna have to take losses and just focus on minimizing my own personal losses. I need to keep an eye on my spells and not dive tower. I've gotten pretty good at not diving tower, but I guess I need to improve it further. And then finally just having a bad position. It's hard to work on having a bad position. That's just something you need to keep in mind, I guess. I don't know how to fix it personally. I would assume it just comes from experience, kinda. But hopefully this was helpful in some sort of way. It was just a very low effort peek into my replay analysis. Hopefully it might help you. And you know, it has helped me a lot throughout the games, throughout my years playing Dota. And maybe you can get some new ideas from it as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye bye.